guys, welcome to the Work on Purpose panel event. My name is Josiah. I serve as the director of the National Institute for Faith and Work, and we are just excited to have together this evening some awesome folks from the National Institute for Faith and Work community, from the fields of coaching and consulting, to share with us around the topic of building people and teams that thrive. And really the vision for these panel events is to bring together industry professionals who are able to offer some insight on their field in a way that will be uniquely applicable to each of us, whatever our work setting would be. And just to gain insight and spark imagination for each of us on how we can serve God in the different places where He's called us. And really what is behind this evening's event is the theological reality that every person has value as an image bearer of God. And each of us have the opportunity to honor God through building into one another and helping others to function with excellence and health in the places where God has called us to serve. And so ultimately, this is an act of stewardship, helping others to thrive in their role, because God has created each of us with gifts and capacities to be put into action in a purposeful way for the flourishing of people, organizations, and communities. And so tonight, again, I'm excited for you to be able to learn and hear and ask questions of these generous members of our community as they share from their own experiences and insight. Why don't I pray for us as we begin our time together? Father, we're grateful for the opportunity to be in community and to come and just be in a place where we can learn and hear from you and from one another. We thank you for your presence in our lives and each of these folks who's going to share. We pray that you would just direct their words through your Spirit, that they would be able to offer words of insight and encouragement for each of us in the places that you have called us to serve, God, that we would be people who bring you glory in all that we do. And we pray this together in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, let me share with you a few words of introduction for our different panelists. Starting at the end, we have Mr. Barney Zhang, Principal of Source Key Solutions. And Barney is an alum of the Gotham Fellowship and a leader within the NIFW community, including the chairperson of The Table, a new fellowship community for executive leaders here in the city that we've partnered with at NIFW. We also have Angela Courtney, master practitioner with North Island Consulting here in the city of Nashville, and Lauren is a current Gotham Fellow. We have Jonathan Payne, the founder of Author Leadership and an advisor for NIFW. And we also have Nicole Rowan, founder of Press Play on Your Purpose Coaching, as well as executive director of Rebuilding Together Nashville. And Nicole is also a Gotham alum. So yes, let me ask you a question as we begin our evening to kind of get to know one another. Why don't we begin with you, Nicole, and we can work our way down the line. Would each of you take 2 or 3 minutes and share with us about some of your own journey with work and how God led you to where you are today?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for spending your time with us and showing up tonight. We appreciate it. So for me, I think when I first went on my journey of career, it was the purpose-driven life in that first statement that said it's not about you. And so that was kind of my aha moment, is that I don't serve for my purpose, I serve for God's good purpose, and I'm here to do His work. And then I just said, you know what, I can't take jobs anymore. I only take divine assignments, and I only go where I'm called. And so I was called here to Nashville to do a work at the Northwest Y. And so I fulfilled that assignment and then went on to consulting, and then which led me to my current position. And so definitely I'm called to that position and really feel that everything that led up to that moment prepared me for this very moment in time.
Beautiful, thank you, Nicole. Jonathan, how about yourself?
Yeah, so like Nicole, I spent an extended season in management consulting, actually getting to work alongside Angela. And I love that opportunity because in management consulting, as you may allude to later, you're coming into situations that have distinct need. Like, organizations don't hire consultants because they wake up and say, "It would be fun if I had a consultant here." Typically, it's because something is broken that's in need of restoration, or they've got imagination for something they want to pursue, and so they're bringing in help to do that. So I love getting to do that work. And as I was doing that work, a colleague of mine once described the work that we do as consultants as you get hired to come in and do a thing. Like, we need you to come in and help us with our strategic plan, or we need to help executing that plan. And he said, what I keep finding when we come in to do these things is sometimes you find it in the first or second day, sometimes you find it a few months in, but typically there's the thing that you're there to do, and then there's all of this that surrounds the thing that you're there to do. And he described that as unnecessary suffering. And he said, that's the work that, yes, coming in and doing a strategic plan, doing the operational implementation, that stuff matters. That is this very significant work. And yet there's all of this other stuff about how we approach the work that we do, how we show up as humans, how we show up as leaders. And if we can have the privilege of taking on that work, that can have such a lasting and sustainable impact, not just on the business, but on who we are and who we go home to, our roommates, our friends, our family, our kids. And I couldn't unhear him saying that. And I began to notice that everywhere I went. I said, that's the problem that I want to solve. I want to help come alongside leaders to make it a healthier environment where people truly can flourish in what they do. And so in the last 3 or 4 years, that's been kind of my focus. And then earlier this year, I went on my own sort of venture that exclusively focused on that work.
Well, this is an exciting season for you and pursuing that mission in a new way. We look forward to hearing more about that later. Yeah, well, Angela.
All right, so I am a career consultant, for better or worse. So people ask, what do you actually do? What does that mean? Usually translation is in order. And so similar to what Jonathan said, usually I say, I am a doctor for sick companies. Companies are really struggling in one way or another. They are going through significant change, about to do a layoff or they've done layoffs. The culture is struggling. People are leaving, all kinds of problems. And so really trying to figure out what is the core issue to what Jonathan said, but also thinking about that larger context in which we find ourselves. And a lot of times when we're hired for a broken process or to implement a new technology solution, what we actually find is there's a lot of impact potential with the people that we're interacting with. And a lot of times we're hired at a pretty senior level with our clients. So we're interacting and supporting and guiding the people who lead people and have a huge potential impact on their firms and their companies and their families of their employees. And so helping them see clearly has tremendous value. And sometimes, especially when you're in a leadership position, it's really hard to know what is true because people won't talk to you honestly. They will tell you only what you want to hear. So part of what I love about what I get to do is I can uncover what is truth, right? There's truth in capital T theologically, but there's also truth when we think about problem solving, what needs to happen, what's getting in the way, the noise. And so helping them see that and giving them clarity and then also guiding them and seeing them as humans and not just leaders and a suit showing up, carrying out tasks that can be daunting and guiding them through that time is what I love. And also where I see huge potential for Christians to make a difference, not only with our clients directly, but also within their whole organizations and then the family members who are hearing the stories about what happened at work that day.
Beautiful, thank you, Angela.
For me, I think I have to start this story with, I was leading a life of disordered desires.
Okay.
So somebody who had your minds in the gutter, you can take it out. I wasn't that bad, right? But I really was. I was good at it. I was good at leading a life of disordered desires. And I was pretty good at business. So my very first job I had, I was making $8,000 a year. And I ended up running businesses from Canada through Argentina, I worked in the UK, I ran some pretty significant businesses. I got really good at it in that I was able to outdo the people around me. So my why for trying to do all of this was really messed up. I was really trying to fill a cup and the classic things, honor, what was my job title, money, what house was I in, did I join a country club, all that stuff. I mean, I was throwing it in the cup like crazy, and that cup was not filling up. Ran a couple of businesses, a couple were pigs, put a little lipstick on them, sold them, get a paycheck, move on to the next one. And finally, I came here to Nashville, poor pig, put some listings on it and sold it. And it started to really, I'd been going on a journey before I got to Nashville that recognized I had been taught when you went to work, you left your faith at the door, you brought your character through the threshold. Every human resources department I had, every lawyer worked for me, they all made sure that I understood that. And about 20 years ago, I knew that was wrong, but I didn't know what was right. And I got here to Nashville about 6 years ago, so again, this is all happening at the same time. And when we sold the company here, that I came here to run in Nashville, I then decided I'm not going back to the corporate. Now I have to admit, it happened after I had like 3 times where I was a bridesmaid going to corporate. So God was closing the door and slamming it in my face. But essentially what had started to happen was I had started to have an authentic relationship with God. I had started going back to church. I moved from the East Coast to the Bible Belt. And so, yeah, when you all ask where you go to church, like we asked where you went to high school, all right? And so I got very comfortable with that. And so I really started getting very deeply back into my faith. And recognized that God brought me to Nashville for a reason, and it wasn't to run corporations. And I believe, and a lot of the education I got, a lot of it was through NIFW, I believe He has me here because I understand how business works, and I understand how important the relationship, the personal relationship with God is. And I think I'm meant to be here in order to bring those 2 things together and help other people see that. So that has me here. That has me. I'm a consultant, and I'm also an executive coach.
Thank you. And Barty, that leads us right into our next question. Can you share with us, those of us who are unfamiliar, how does a coach help develop people and teams versus a consultant? How are the 2 roles similar? How are they different?
I'm going to answer that 2 ways. I'm going to give you a simple answer, and then I'm going to give you a more complex answer, because I think it's important for the audience to understand some of the complexity of it. The simple answer is a consultant is there to help bring a solution and to develop a business and support people in the process. A coach is there to develop a person and support a business in the process. So that's a distinction. But to really highlight that, I'm going to break it out into 4 groups instead of simply coaching and consulting. I think it's important to understand the difference between counseling, coaching, mentoring, and consulting. So a counselor is looking backwards. All right. So what are the things that are getting in front of somebody that they can't get through because of something that happened in their past? That's generally a therapist of some sort. It's generally somebody that has to be licensed. In the state of Tennessee, you have to be licensed for that. It helps you figure out why you do what you do. In theological terms, why do you sin? Okay. So what are your idols? And then how does that come out in your life? And once you understand that, you can start to have a little bit more control of your life and control where you're going. So that's counseling. That's backward looking, right? A coach, an executive coach, and what I do is forward looking. We don't look at the back. We look at with the individual, where do they want to go? What do they want to accomplish? And through questioning, and so it's really through much more listening and questioning, we find out what's in them that needs to come out, so they learn from inside what it is that they need to do. We'll also help them develop a plan, and then we'll be with them as they go through that plan, holding them accountable along the way to accomplish that. And that's different than a mentor. Really similar, except a mentor is going to bring things to the table from their own personal experience. Right, so I've got experience in financial services, so it's really easy for me to mentor an individual who's working in a financial services environment, because I know it really well. I also have some experience in the cannabis business. Again, get your money side of that better, okay? From an industry standpoint. So I can easily mentor somebody in that industry because I know it. And that's different than consulting. Now, consulting is, and these guys will correct me, they know better than I do, but I do some consulting, but it's where you're actually bringing up a solution. And you're either bringing a solution with additional knowledge and expertise that the company doesn't have themselves, or in manpower and resource to accomplish something that But in either case, you're actually doing more telling than asking. In the beginning, there's a lot of asking. But there's coming forward and telling and saying, hey, here's a solution. Where coaching is not that. You're not sharing your experience. You're not telling them what they need to do. You're helping people discover what they need to do for themselves. Long answer, but is that, and please chime in, please.
I'm going to play my consulting card here
Go for it.
and offer an addendum. Consultant's going to come to the table with 3 points, a stack of PowerPoints, and multiple suggestions for different ways to do things and additional projects that you could fund in. So that's a joke, right?
No, but no, actually, it was when you were talking about, Jonathan, all the stuff they come in for. They're asking you for the solution, but it's all that other stuff that goes around it. So that's when you get the mentoring and coaching.
Thank you both. That's really helpful foundational groundwork for us in thinking about how these unique roles are ways for people to be equipped and teams to really be led to further health and effectiveness. Any further points of clarification? Are we ready to move on?
No, I thought that was really well said. Good job.
Yeah, you said things I would have said, so good job.
I love it. Well, Nicole, we'll have you answer this one first. As we kind of get to know each of you in the unique ways that you're serving, can you share with us sort of a highs and lows of your job question? The first is, what do you enjoy the most about the opportunities your work gives you to help people and teams to thrive? And second, what is the most difficult thing for you in navigating the opportunities God has given you to serve in your field?
Well, I think that I would just say your gifts make room for you, but sometimes you can't see that gift. Other people have to point it out. And so one thing that was pointed out to me by my husband is that every job that I took, once I began to say, okay, this is calling me, I know that this is God's assignment for me, that the team always needed work. And so that's not something you can find out in an interview. You get there and then you see it. And so the highs are that you get to lead people up to your expectations of what you see in them that they don't see in themselves, and that's a beautiful thing. When they begin to see themselves as you see them as a leader, and that they come back and tell you, if you had not pushed me, I wouldn't be here. And a lot of people that I worked with staff, they always got promotions because I was always pushing them to not stay where they were and to talk about what is it that you want and what is your purpose. And so being very deliberate about that language and saying, why are you here, and making sure that you're in the right seat on the bus. Because a training that I was sent to helped me to realize I wasn't in the right seat on the bus. And I thank them for sending me to the training, but it ultimately let me be where I needed to be. And so, what was the second part of the question?
The second question is, what's the most difficult thing for you in navigating the opportunities and responsibilities you have as a leader in your field?
I think it's once you know a thing about somebody, it's hard to unknow it. You can't unknow it. And so when you know that somebody's struggling on your team, but they're not performing, and you know that you still have a job to do, and we still all have a purpose of why we're here and why you were hired, for me that has been very challenging. To see the human side of the person and to step outside of my hat as that leader, that exec, and say, you know what, I'm just going to talk to you just person to person. And that's where the coaching comes in. And people hate, a lot of people that have reported to me have hated it because you're just asking them questions to get to the answer that you know they already have, and they just want you to tell them. And it's like, I'm not going to tell you, I'm sorry. And so you have to lead them to where they need to be, and sometimes that causes them to have to leave the organization. So I think dealing with other people's personal issues and knowing that they may not be the right person has been very challenging, but also you know that that's ultimately the right thing to do.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Yeah, the high for me of getting to do the coaching work that I do and developing leaders is it's really you're developing humans. Like my belief is that if you have healthy leaders leading healthy teams, that there's a ripple effect of that, like I alluded to earlier, that doesn't just show up in the corporate context, but it shows up in every aspect of your life. And likewise, if you're in an unhealthy place as a leader or as an employee, that shows up in every aspect of your life. And so to me, the high is the unique privilege it is to come alongside a human, a person, and sit with them and help them explore who they aspire to be, and to recognize that we're all becoming someone. Like we as believers know the concept of spiritual formation. We're all being formed into someone in particular, whether that's a leader or otherwise. And so getting to work with leaders and help them recognize the opportunities that we have to be formed into someone intentional is really neat. And the intimate context of a one-on-one coaching relationship is such a privilege because, like you said, supporting a person, like that whole person, and helping them imagine, like, hey, the world, the way in which we see the world today doesn't have to be the way in which we see the world. And so I love just getting to do that work and open our perspectives into what's possible. I'd say the challenging part of that is my experience has been people see coaching and this kind of work as either a nice to have, like, oh, that would be neat someday if we have it, but we're not really in a place where we can invest in that. Or it's something that you only call upon in the state of emergency. Stuff has hit the fan, and all of a sudden now it's like a coach in. And my assessment is, man, we all need this work. And if we can proactively invest in our people and invest in ourselves in this work, there's just a tremendous possibility there. But it's so frustrating. Like, this stuff is great. Everyone should want this and benefit from this, but not everyone is there. And so I feel that tension about what they do.
My highs and lows are really two sides of the same coin. So it's thinking through the both and aspect of my job. I love that I get to wear a ton of different hats every day. In terms of skills that I am using from leading a team at North Highland to my firm, to leading client teams, to business development, to actually doing the work, PowerPoint slides, Excel analysis. There's so many different types of skills that I get to use, and I like the variety. I thrive on the variety, and that's a lot of fun for me. And I also, through that, get to work with a lot of different people at different stages in their careers with different needs. So just the variety for me keeps me on my toes, and I enjoy interacting with so many different people. So absolutely love all just the core work day to day that I do. Not that every day is perfect. Lows, though, the flip side of that is I have a lot of competing priorities, and so it's figuring out where do I put my mind and time where it's going to have the biggest payoff. And so that's challenging because I really do it all, right? I really do enjoy, I'd say 95% plus of the actual task that I'm doing. I put thought into, like which is going to have the highest return, and where is this going to pay off down the road for the client or for the team. And so it's hard to continually evaluate those decisions because there's one of me and so many interests that I have and so many opportunities. So it's a flip side again of the same coin. Overall though, just really, really grateful to be in a position where I feel like I'm able to use different talents that I've been given and able to hone, hopefully for the glory of God over time.
Okay. Highs and lows for me. I'm going to do, because I do consulting, I'm going to do executive coaching. So highs, I'm going to be on the executive, I'll say on the executive coaching side. It's seeing somebody bloom, and seeing them bloom where they're planted is really cool for me. And it may not be some large corporate executive guy. I'm going to give an example of it. I actually work with a guy right now who is a former priest. He's been a priest for going on 17 years. And he decided and discerned his way out of being a priest. So he's been out for about 2 years. And he's working, but he's way underemployed. He has no clue, or had no clue how to tell his story. He didn't know how to write a resume. He didn't know how to have a coffee with somebody. He didn't know how to network. So it was really an incredible. I talked to him the other day. I said, if you can find me another priest, bring him on, because it was an incredible journey to see what this man has done. And he was looking at going into one industry, and so now he's decided not to do that and go into a different one. But the joy on his face when he told me that this week, and how he planned out how he was going to do it. When he told me the very first time I met him, I don't know how to fill up a blank sheet of paper. He does now. Okay, so that's just a joy. That's just incredible joy. And you see it come out in different ways in different people. The down for me is probably on the consulting side. When you do, you see, they know, all right? I don't even need to say, okay? Here's what you should do. Here's how you can do it. And then you walk away. And it's up to them to follow through, okay? And so that's just like, because you emotionally own it and you want to see it through. The other high, and specifically with the executive coaching that I get to do, I actually get to start my coaching sessions with, and this is not my corporate life, disordered desires, not having that relationship, I get to start my conversations with people and say, and what's God doing in your life today? So every time I get to say that, it's just
So it's hard to walk away without seeing how they're implementing it.
You give them a whole plan, and it's hard to see. I mean, you give it to them, you give them the plan.
Do you ever loop back around to see if it worked?
Yeah, you usually hear.
Yeah. For better or worse. Well, thank you so much. The next question is we kind of pivot towards talking about your developing strategies for teams and people. I think really what's behind this event is that the leadership is hard, management is hard, and oftentimes folks who are great team players are promoted into positions where they're leading others, but haven't necessarily been equipped on how to best do that. And so I want to ask you two questions. Would you share with us, what is one of the most common challenges that you see leaders struggle with when it comes to helping others develop in their career journey? So one of the most common challenges you see other leaders struggle with when it comes to developing in their career journey. And then how's your faith in Christ informed the way that you help leaders improve in their ability to develop others? So I'd love for each of you to share, but you don't need to work down the line each time.
I'm happy to take it. I think in response to that question, I'll share something that a coach identified in me last year, which was I have a tendency to show up as the leader that I prefer to be and not as the leader the situation needs. Now, there are times when the leader that I prefer to be overlaps with what the situation needs, and that's fantastic. But the leader I prefer to be is the well-liked, nice person who's affirming and is fun to be around. And in leadership positions, that's not always going to serve the situation, nor is it going to serve the person that's reporting to you. Like you mentioned earlier, like sometimes there are people that you need to have, the loving thing to do for that person is to have a difficult conversation with them, in which you may come out on the other side not well-liked. Just the same way that my kids, if I wanted them to like me at all times, may not grow up into the Christ-following, like loving people that I would aspire for them to be. And so I think, I don't think I'm alone in that. I think many of us prefer to show up in a particular way. And it can be hard to flex over to what does this situation need and how do I step into that. But I also think that shows up in a way where the leader that I prefer to be is the leader that I aspire all of you to be. So when I'm helping to develop you, I'm imagining you becoming me, or becoming a leader who is like me, who has similar preferences and similar aspirations, and that may not be true.
How do you know which leader to show up as?
That's a great question. I don't always know, but since that was recognized in me, it's helped me to pause before I enter into a situation and assess what might this situation need. And oftentimes there's great humility in that. It brings me to prayer. I don't want to do this. But you mentioned the second question of like, how does your faith inspire your approach to this? It's understanding that we're part of a bigger picture and understanding that God made us all uniquely. And so God may have made you, Josiah, to be a different leader than me. And so knowing that, I need to get to know you and help understand your aspirations and who the Lord is calling you to be, and listen to that attentively and help you grow into that leader and not in who God has wired me to be. And so that, just having that worldview shift of like, hey, my worth doesn't ride on you liking me, and knowing that you can be someone different, and that is beautiful. That's part of God's design.
Are you going to charge me for this coaching, John?
Oh, yes.
Keep going, buddy.
I'll let others chime in though.
Thank you so much.
No, I love your answer. So what do I let me rephrase the question, make sure I got it. What do I see in leaders that they make mistakes as they're trying to build their teams? Is that it?
Yeah, the question is, what are some of the most common struggles that you see with leaders as it comes to developing others, and how does your faith in Christ inform your approach?
Jonathan definitely covered off the one about hiring people like yourself, okay? Assuming that because you were good at what you were doing, you got promoted, therefore you're now the best leader. Always not true. That's the one. The one for me, though, that I can write on the tails of that is communication skills. Most of the problems that I saw in business were not business problems. They were communication problems. And if you really got people to understand the truth, which according to that Angela's talking about, the real truth in getting people to communicate, that's where you can eliminate a lot of problem and you can create a smoother running team. And it's not easy, especially if you thought everybody on the team needs to be like you. Because guess what? They got all your same problems. And you don't have somebody on the team that has a different worldview in order to understand how the organization is feeling. Because everybody in the organization isn't like you. So anyway, so communications to me is a big one, and teaching people good communication skills and just bringing God into it, it really has to do with the Imago Dei. And getting people to understand that everybody is created in the image of Christ. You just had this meeting, the guy on the other side of the table had horns and cloven feet and a tail, and you are pissed, but you really need to recognize that they were created in the image of Christ too. And it's not easy to do, but if you can come at it in that perspective, a lot of communication will start to get fixed. But it's also you need other people on your team that have different perspectives.
Go for it.
I think something that I see is that a lot of leaders aren't willing to own it. Own the fact that the success of your team is on you. And so I hear a lot of people saying, they didn't do X, Y, Z. But really as a leader, did you set them up to be successful to do X, Y, Z? And so I think that there's a lot of blaming that happens. And at the end of the day, as the leader, it's your job to make sure that everybody is set up for success. And I think that that's a blind spot that a lot of leaders have, is that they're just not willing to own the fact that if someone that reports to you is not successful, that's a part of your problem. Because you didn't catch it early or whatever happened, you didn't see it or you allowed it to go on before you addressed it. And so you have to own it as a leader that everything that happens in the organization, it's your responsibility to make sure that those things are happening even though it's assigned to someone else. And so the way in which I think God plays a part in that is that he holds us accountable. We're stewards over the position. It's not, he's assigned us to a work. And so we have to be accountable to God first and foremost, and then we're accountable to the people in serving them in a Christ-like way. And so I don't think blaming or not owning it is Christ-like.
I would say lack of clarity and focus on what actually matters. Especially when you think about it in my fraternity. And I can't tell you how many leaders I see and hear, leaders of global Fortune 500 companies that you would know, use their products on a regular basis, where they have the talk right? They have the varnish, they have the resume, they have the schools, but they've lost sight of what actually matters at the end of the day, both in their business and their homes, and with their people who come into the office virtually every single day. And I see this play out in different ways. There's a CEO, you ask, what's your corporate strategy? Literally, he pulls out in his back pocket a piece of notebook paper. He has a list of 21 priorities for the year. Really? How? Right? And no clarity. No clarity on what actually matters and what actually was going to get the numbers that their private equity firm was requiring of them. Tremendous pressure in that situation. Other leaders where they'll talk the talk, and it absolutely just makes my skin crawl every time I see this. But it's not authentic at all. I've got a client right now. We're doing culture strategy and transformation for them, and the largest challenge that we have is that we've been hired to do a transformation, and yet the leadership team, when we're really being honest, they don't live that culture at all, right? And their people see it. Their people see it, and they're not holding themselves accountable to that. And so, how do we execute on a strategy for them when they're not eating, living, and breathing what they're saying? They believe in what they expect their people to follow through on. So, absolutely, at the end of the day, we see it manifest in different scenarios, but consistently, the lack of clarity and the lack of vision on what actually matters.
21 priorities. There we go.
I'll never forget.
That's a perfect segue into our next question, which is really about how to develop teams. I want to ask you all, what are some of those common limiters that you see for leaders when it comes to developing teams that are healthy and effective? And how does a Christian worldview influence your approach to helping leaders think differently about how to develop their teams?
So my answer to this is not unlike what you just alluded to, Barney, which is communication skills. I think, to me, a lot of it centers around conversations, and specifically missing conversations or ineffective conversations. I think, Josiah, you and I were talking earlier this week about how one of the greatest barriers to communication is the illusion that it has occurred. And I think for so many of us, we either think we've communicated clearly, we think we've had the conversation effectively, and we haven't, or it's a conversation where I can't actually talk to that person. So instead of talking to you, I'll go talk to the three of you, and we'll kind of triangulate and find our way there, and hopefully it'll trickle back to you, and that will solve it. Because we think that's going to be more comfortable and less painless, and perhaps we even think it's more effective than going and having a conversation that we need to have with that person. Because that sounds hard. And I think the more equipped we can become to have effective conversations in love with whomever we need to have that conversation with on our team, ultimately the healthier we can become. But that's hard to do.
Yeah, I think another challenge is the cookie cutter approach, is that I, as a leader, have a style, and I'm going to manage all of you the same way. And so not wanting to be flexible as a leader and understanding, having some emotional intelligence about how your actions then affect other people and being able to pivot in the moment. So if I know that I'm talking to Kirsten and she's squirming, I'm looking at her body language, but I'm still want to drive home my point, that's not Christ-like. And so I should notice that she's uncomfortable, and I should adjust my style as the leader to be effective. Because just because it's communicated doesn't mean it resonates. And so we can talk all that we want to about messages and how to deliver that message to someone, but if it is not heard, then it was ineffective. And so I think that a lot of leaders just think that they can treat everybody the same and put them in a position. And then the other thing that I would say is not putting people where their strengths are. And so wanting to coach those weaknesses, I don't Me personally, I don't believe in that style. I believe put people where they can be successful, where they're going to be happy, where they're going to thrive, and then build the other deficits around that so that it's a team approach and we can be successful as a team. Versus me keep saying to you, well, you know, you're not good at accounting, so let's get you some accounting training. She doesn't want to do it.
That's the insight for our building people and teams that quit panel that we'll do later that day. Put people in the role for everything they're terrible at.
Here's the cultural societal limitation to being a good leader. Both of you talked about being Christ-like. And when you said that you're doing this in love, right? I can't remember a boardroom that I was ever in where they talked about doing something in love. And that's the problem. That's what has to change. Whether you do it from a Christ-centric point of view, from a religious point of view, but getting people to understand that yes, we're all taught that you're here for, you know, what can you make for the shareholders, and you've got to hit your numbers and all that stuff. But there's a way to do it in love. And if that had ever come up in any of the corporations that I work in, you wouldn't be in that boardroom for very long. That they would have drummed you out really fast. But they're like, what's it about? But that's what's important. And it's missing.
Are there any ways that spirit can be implemented in a way that is accessible to those who would have an alternative worldview?
Besides staying coffee? So just checking.
Got a $20 bill for you after the event.
No, it's there. It's there. I mean, I'm never going to go out and tell somebody to do something that's going to get them fired. It's not the right thing to do, right? There's going to be rules and regulations that you've got to work within. But getting people to recognize, let's go here. Getting people to recognize performance-based self-worth. Okay? So we all end up feeling that we have to perform, we have to hit those numbers. If we don't hit those numbers, I'm not any good. And it's like, no. God loves you whether or not you hit those numbers or don't hit those numbers. God loves you whether or not you made that sale or didn't make that sale. God loves you whether or not that presentation went well or didn't go well. And if you can get an individual to understand that level of love, it will allow them to grow. And it will allow them to perform. And their why changes, okay? That was me trying to fill that cup, okay? My why had to change. So I still have to perform. I'm not saying you don't have to perform anymore. You have to perform. You have a job to do. You have to do sales. But you're just going out there being the best salesman you can be with the skills that God gave you. You're going to get the best presentation you can give with the skills that God gave you. So your why changes. So that it's getting that why to change and having that conversation about the why changing that I think will allow us to go further. And the limiting thing is that our culture and our society won't let you do it. You're going to get called into HR and the legal department real fast if you start talking about God.
I'm going to add an academic lens to this too, because we call this psychological safety. So that can be a loaded term. What does that actually mean? I mean, it's a term that basically means creating a culture of trust, and it doesn't necessarily have to be faith specific. But when you have teams that can actually have candid, respectful conversations with each other, you can unlock the talent that God has given in every person in that team, whether they're a believer or not, and you can actually get to know the people that you're working side by side with, because you're managing, who you're reporting to. I mean, otherwise, we see time and time again the real challenge of companies that have this culture where you have to show up as a certain image because of performance-based self-worth, right? We think about how do we know what's working, what's not working. We have to have a measure, right? And then we have the performance management matrix and the score. It's a 1 to 5, or animal, or color, and like all these different schemes. And like, what am I today? And we write people. Well, how are you going to speak your mind if you're worried about getting dinged because you took a risk and maybe you were wrong, right? It's really hard to show up and to offer your talents when you're scared. We find that a lot of teams are operating in cultures of fear because of that whole dynamic, that construct from performance management and performance-based self-work. And so when we can start to impact that culture, and there is absolute faith lens to this too, you have people who are empowered to show up as their true and best self. Now that doesn't mean you can say anything you want to say, right? Obviously not. And it's within certain confines, but we're seeing huge changes in a favorable way, like pharma, for instance, where their lifeblood is innovation. So they have to be progress, and they've been operating in cultures of fear for decades, and we're changing that picture and changing that too. And you can do that deliberately. That you do have to reorient that thinking around performance-based self-work.
I love that you went the academic route, because psychological safety is where my head went to your question. Because if you come into a boardroom and you talk about love, yeah, alarm bells go off. Like, we don't do the soft stuff. That's really soft. But Google did a research study a number of years ago, looking out across all of their teams, because they wanted to figure out what makes our best teams so effective. And they looked at everything. They looked at experience, they looked at tenure, they looked at demographics. And it wasn't until they came across Amy Edmondson's research on psychological safety that unlocked everything. And they looked at it and said, this is far and away the number one indicator of whether our team is successful is, do they have psychological safety, which is a lack of interpersonal fear. Now, those who know the scriptures would say, well, yeah, of course. But you can't come into a boardroom and talk about love and talk about how we've been wired, how we've been created by our intentional maker. But you can come in and talk about productivity at Google, and that resonates. And so this stuff shows up. That's how the world is created. And we're seeing it manifested through actual research. And so coming into those contexts, being able to speak to that, it emboldens those claims in ways that's really helpful.
It can be hard to hold together a standard of high performance and expectations with that sort of unconditional love, but I think that an example of what that can look like is saying, I believe in you and I'm going to help you get there, even though right now you're not hitting the mark. And I can certainly say there are more times that I've got this wrong than that I've got it right. But I remember a conversation when I was in the coaching world with an athlete, where one night I'm talking to him about finding his identity in Christ rather than in his times. The next day I'm in a meeting with him and we're saying, also, if you don't drop your mile by 10 seconds, we're going to have to cut your scholarship in half. But I believe in you and I know you can get there and I'm going to help you get there. And that's a really challenging thing, but it can be done. Sometimes leadership and management is really messy. But I would like to think when we navigate it in a way where we really do believe in people and create safety and trust, it can be done. Thank you for sharing that. Next question is for Angela and Nicole. I'm interested to hear, are there any words of encouragement or challenge you'd like to share with women in leadership specifically? Maybe related to a unique challenge women face or an opportunity for women to make a unique and special contribution in the places where God has called them to serve as leaders.
Go for it, Angela.
I probably don't. I'm going to have to disclaim what I'm about to say. I definitely view myself as a woman at work, and bring that lens to the table because that's who I am, and I'm proud of that. But I don't want to be known as a hopefully good woman consultant. I want to be known as a great consultant, or a great leader. I don't want a qualifier or a caveat that I'm this flavor of somebody. And I have seen, it's going to age me, but in my career of 15 years, a huge shift in terms of acceptance of women in leadership roles and just the normalization of that. So definitely have seen that shift. It's highly encouraging, and also for men, the acceptance of bringing your whole self to work, including your family. So, am I a woman? Yes. Am I a consultant? Yes. And I can be all of those things, and I don't see conflict. And I'm seeing more and more, even especially post-COVID, I'm seeing firms embrace different work structures that make that possible for both men and women.
Yeah, I would say the lens that I see this the most in is that I'm a ordained pastor. And so women aren't always respected in the same ways, and it's very visible, and sometimes it's very transparent. And so I think that you can't shy away from the fact that there are different mentalities about women in leadership in the secular world, but also in the religious realms. And so I think that for me, I'm just always showing up as my best self. And I'm not a person that you're going to put me in a box. I don't stay in boxes, and so people just are never able to really figure it out and put their finger on it. But I think that the success outweighs the fact that I show up as a female because I'm getting results. And so that's what I focus on more than anything. But I also think that there is a beauty in representing females in leadership, and I won't shy away from that. I accept the fact that I am female, and I accept, that banner that I carry, that other women are looking up to me.
Thank you both. Really appreciate your willingness to share your experiences and encouragement with us. We have a number of entrepreneurs on our stage here, and Jonathan, in the past 6 months, you have begun a new season launching author leadership, and so that's a big deal. And I'm curious, how have you experienced God at work in your life in this season that must be both really exciting and also a little scary?
Yes. As I was telling Marty and Angela beforehand, I probably should have been more fearful. We welcomed our fourth child in January, and so you don't usually say, hey, what's a good thing to do after you welcome a newborn, much less like your fourth kid? Maybe say no to a paycheck and a salary and just try to force something to do. This would be a perfect time to do that. But I really did feel, I spent a lot of time in prayer, and not like, oh, I'll pray about that, and I'm actually just going to make a decision. I spent a lot of time in prayer and felt this overwhelming sense of the Lord saying, your metrics of success may not be my metrics of success. Even if this venture fails spectacularly, that may be my intention for you in the season. And so I went into this venture with that just sense of presence of this is what I feel like the Lord has called me to. And it's been great in many ways. I'm so pleased with the decision. And there's been challenges. I was reading through Psalm 62 earlier this week, where the psalmist says, my soul finds its rest in God. My hope is found in Him. And I need that to be true. Because I think I'm recognizing how often, if I was the psalmist, I would probably say, my soul finds its rest in the performance of my venture. My soul finds its rest in the number of clients and the revenue targets and how much people are interested in and like my business. My hope is found in that. And it's not. And so this experience has helped me really recognize that. I don't think you need to be an entrepreneur to go through that experience. I think we all find that in our vocation. We look for our worth and our value and our identity in the work that we do more often than we should. But that has been really prevalent for me in the season. Even really well-intended people come, hey, how's the business? You have lots of clients. You have a lot of revenue. And it's like, I might, but even in the question of that, it suggests what we hold as this cultural value is up and to the right is the objective. And one of the things that was compelling to me about going on my own was the ability to do it differently with greater margin and pace and being able to be present for my kids and being able to be really thoughtful and intentional about the work that I'm doing. But in some contexts, you just don't have the capacity to have that margin. And so a lot of the way in which I'm trying to do it is countercultural. And that's hard. Like, I need Jesus in that because left to my own devices, it's a lot easier to be cultural than countercultural. So I've sensed a lot of that. Where do I find my identity? Being reminded by the Spirit constantly. You're not going to find it in a good time.
Thank you for that. That's I really appreciate your vulnerability in sharing that, and I can identify with that personally, as I'm sure is true for every one of us here in one way or another. And so I'm so encouraged by you all and your heart for the Lord. I think a common thread that I've seen across this is really for each of us, in whatever our field, whatever it might be, God has put opportunities in front of us to be able to invest in people and their journey, to be able to serve Him in their work, whether they know Him or not, but also to grow as people and to learn how to do life with others well. And so I think you've given us some really meaningful thoughts to consider as it relates to the way that we would steward well the opportunities God has given each of us and the people and teams that we serve with. So I want to thank you. We have covered a lot of ground, but we have just a few minutes. If there are any questions that anyone would like to ask, I know you all would be willing to share. Are there any questions? Yes. You can just belt it out.
Great. My question is for the two ladies up there. You were talking about women in leadership. Something I've found, not necessarily in leadership, but just in my career as a woman, a tendency to want to fight against my feminist traits because masculinity is more, it's just what I'm surrounded by in the workplace generally. So I was wondering, what about your femininity has allowed you to thrive rather than pushing against it, like embracing it and saying, not in this overwhelming, like, I'm going to take over, like, with my food, but like, this is a gift from God and I want to use it in the workplace. What about your femininity has done that for you?
I love this question. Thank you so much for asking this, because I think that there are meaningful differences between men and women and our just natural styles and the gifts that God has given both sexes. And I think recognizing that and embracing our femininity is a gift, and we can add so much in the workplace. I think for me and for some other women that I look up to who are leaders, they really emphasize relationships. And I've tried to do that too, sometimes better than others. And I have a brain for numbers as well, so I can speak that language and be very comfortable and fluent when I'm in groups with all men. That's less and less frequent now than it was earlier in my career. But regardless, what I try to bring to the table is, that sounds very insulting, is that focus, that lens on the people and the hearts, as opposed to just the boxes on an org chart. And wearing pink and being proud and not just trying to hide who I am.
Yeah, I think for me, that is a very good question, and I want to be thoughtful in my answer, because when I've shown up in the rooms that I've been in, they have been predominantly male and white males, and so the way in which I'm showing up as a Black woman is very different, and so I'm cognizant of that. And so for me, I'm going in thinking, what a gift you have to learn, my perspective that is not represented at this table. And if you don't perceive that as a gift, then that's on you. But I always see it when I'm at the table as a gift to give a voice to somebody that is underrepresented and many times not represented. And so I bring all of me, and I don't shy away from being nurturing or saying nurturing things that need to happen in those conversations, because a lot of times it's very harsh and it's very bottom line and black and white. And my mind just automatically thinks that way. I'm very logical, I'm very systematic, so, I get along very well with males. But, because I feel that they're much like that. Not on the emotional side, I'm not very much on the emotional side. And so I think for me, I've had to do the opposite, is bring the emotion to the table. because that's a real experience when I'm saying, like, sitting in front of somebody and watching them cringe or cry, and I'm like, oh, here's the tissue, but I need to still tell you X, Y, Z. And that's, you would perceive that from a woman. And so I think for me, it's been the opposite, that I've had to soften.
Oh, those are such great answers. Thank you, guys. Do we have any other questions? All right, well, Lauren, I want to invite Lauren Brett forward. Lauren is our project coordinator with NIFW. Lauren, you can take my seat, and Lauren's going to share a few announcements and then close us with a little prayer liturgy.
Sweet. Are they saying on stage?
Yeah, you can great muscle.
Thank you all for being here tonight. We really appreciate it. Can we just say thank you to our panelists? They did such a thoughtful conversation. I was taking notes as we were going. I'm going to post it on our social media and quote each of you, so stay tuned for that. But you had some really great insights, so thank you. We are doing our Work on Purpose panel series, and so this is our first one, our inaugural event. Our next one will take place on November 17th at 7:30 p.m. at Lipscomb University. We would love to see all of you there. We will be talking about cultivating community and meaning in business, I believe is the title of that. We have industry leaders from tech, marketing, supply chain, and business in general, just kind of talking through those frames as well. So I'm really excited about that. We'd love to see each of you there. In addition to that, we'll be launching a winter study on October 4th. We were going to post about it, but it's going to take place in January. And the book is titled The Missional Disciple, Pursuing Mercy and Justice at Work. I am really excited about this resource. It's a brand new resource from Redeemer City to City, which is a ministry out in New York City. And I would just love for you guys to join us to study that together. We'll post all the information on NIFW.org. I'll post it on our social media. You can also send me an email. I'll get you the information. But genuinely would love to see you at that study. Two final things. We are currently hosting our 8th Gotham Fellowship, which is just an incredible opportunity because I get to be part of it this time. I get to hang out with Angela. And as you've heard from so many of our panelists and getting to talk, if you are interested in Gotham or you would like to know more, Josiah is setting up some virtual meetings, or he would probably even grab coffee with you to talk about Gotham as well, to hear what we do and how that works and what does it look like to work on purpose. So if you're interested in Gotham, the information to set up a meeting virtually with Josiah is online as well. And our final thing to close us out tonight is I have a resource. It's my favorite resource. I've worked at NIFW for about 6 weeks, and I've used this now 3 times. So if you're counting, that's every other week. I don't know if I can sustain that, but for right now, we are on that track. But it's called Every Moment Holy, and it is a liturgy and it's prayers. Something that has been really beneficial to me as I've worked in different industries is just reading words of leaders who have gone before me and who have done this work faithfully. And so tonight I'm going to read for us a closing prayer, and it's a liturgy for one who is employed, which is most of us in this room. So I'm going to read that and close us out. O Christ, who supplies my every need, I praise you for all the provisions and for the means by which they are provided. For my current employment in this season of life, I give you thanks. By it, may I meet my own needs and contribute to the needs of others. Let me work and serve in this position with mindfulness, creativity, and kindness, loving you well by loving all who I encounter here. Jesus, be ever present as mediator between me and my employer, between me and my supervisors and coworkers, and all my dealings with others in this work, reminding me that my treatment of them is the strongest evidence of my affection for you. Grant me, therefore, the patience to listen to others, the humility to learn from them, the compassion to consider their needs as my own, and the grace to wear well in this place the name of my Lord, remembering that I arrive here each day as an emissary of your kingdom. Let me be an asset to my employer and my superiors, working for their flourishing without resentment. Let me be a support to my peers, contributing to their advancement without jealousy.
Let me be an encouragement to any I train or lead, affirming and equipping them without disdain. May the days of my employment here be meaningful. Use this chapter in my life to accomplish your ends, whatever they might be. May my presence here daily suggest your presence here. And may the outworking of the gospel be always evident in this, my work, that my service as an employee might be ever reckoned and received as service first rendered unto you, O Christ. Amen.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, panelists.